Okay, let's move on to Module 10, Resolving Resource Overallocations. This particular module is going to deal with resources that are in your schedule that you want to identify as either being over or under allocated. So before you get started with your schedule and you move from planning and into execution, you're going to want to make sure that your resources don't have too much work assigned to them. And in this module we'll cover how we will deal with identifying those resources that are overallocated, and then at that point you can make adjustments by either assigning another resource to that particular task, potentially making adjustments to the schedule itself by changing dependencies or setting some constraints, but you will at least be able to identify those resources that are overallocated so that you can make the necessary adjustments to your schedule. So let's look at a couple new terms, two of which I've already identified, but let's look at those a little bit closer. The first one is overallocated. So the first thing that we're going to look at here is an overallocation is essentially assigning too many tasks or too much work to a particular resource in your schedule in the time that they have available. Obviously the opposite of that is underallocation. So this is also going to provide you with the ability to understand which resources don't have enough work assigned to them, and then you can make the appropriate adjustments at that point. So there's a resource allocation view that we're going to want to become familiar with as we go through this module that will take us to that particular area. You want to make sure that you have the MP07 fund module 10 file available to you, and then you can go ahead and save that as the new file name and we'll get started. Okay, now you should have the module 10 file open and available to you. The very first thing we'll do, as we've been doing in each of these modules, is to save this as a new file name. I'm simply going to put the my in front of this. So my MP07 fund module 10 MPP, and go ahead and save that file. Since we're talking about overallocation in this particular module, the very first thing we're going to want to do is bring out our resource management toolbar if you don't already have that out there, and the way you'll get to that is by right-clicking, and as you can see I already have my resource management toolbar available to me, so I'm going to right-click and uncheck that so that you can see that, and I'll right-click again and bring up my resource management toolbar. This is going to be a useful toolbar for you as you deal with resources, because what it provides you is quick and easy access to a couple views that are going to be of interest to you. The one in particular that we'll work with today is the resource allocation view. So I'm going to go up and click on that resource allocation view, and you're going to notice what that does is it places my screen in a split, in a split screen view, so that I can select a particular resource in the upper pane. So I'm going to collapse this first part which says unassigned, and it's just going to collapse that up. Now in the manual it's asking you to hit the F5 key to get quickly to ChemRols, so even in this particular view, if I use the F5, it's going to go to a particular area of interest, which in this case, if I did type in 3 here and click OK, what it's doing is it's quickly taking me down to ChemRols. But what I could have just easily have done is just simply clicked on her as a resource to see where the overallocations actually reside. Now that I've identified her, you can see that she is in red. It shows the total amount of work, and then over here to the right hand side in my time scale I can actually see where she's potentially overallocated. I can scroll across to see a little bit more, and then identify exactly where she's overallocated from a timeline perspective. Now I'm in the upper pane, so I'm going to want to click in the lower pane to make that the active pane, and as you can see it highlights to a darker blue here that's telling me that I'm actually down in this lower area. Okay. Now in the book you'll notice that it is also asking you to hit AltHome here, and what AltHome is doing for you is it's simply taking you to the beginning of in the timeline to the tasks. Right, so you can see that when I'm in this lower pane and I have clicked and made it active and I hit the Alt-Home key, it just simply took me to the beginning of that. Okay, so there's a variety of different ways in which we can move around to get to the appropriate location. Now the next thing I'm going to want to do while I'm in here is I'm going to go back up to my new toolbar, my resource management toolbar, and you'll notice that there's a go to next overallocation, and what this is going to do is it's just going to move me through and identify the overallocation. So by clicking on the go to next overallocation, it just moved me to that particular area, and you can see that there's an overallocation there. Right. So what we're going to want to do as you look at your PDF is that you have some new terms there related to both over and under allocation, and also the use of leveling here. So what leveling is going to do for us, it is going to attempt at resolving these overallocations. Right. Now we can use leveling in a couple different ways. Primarily what we're going to want to do is to use it in either a manual or an automatic mode, and when we do that, it is going to make an attempt to resolve these overallocations. So the very first thing we can do here is let's go ahead and take a look at the project information just to get an idea of what we're looking at currently before we actually attempt to resolve this overallocation. The first thing is make a note of the finish date, which is now 5/13/2010, so that when we go through the overallocation we can also see how this is potentially going to be adjusted. So where we're going to find the overallocation and our ability to resolve our overallocation is through leveling. So I'm going to go up to Tools, and I'm going to go down to Level Resources. From the Resource Leveling dialog box, you'll see that there's a couple different options here. The first one under Leveling Calculations is it's allowing us to either do this manual or automatic. I suggest that you use manual so that it forces you to come into this and actually manually level this as opposed to it continuously leveling it for you. And then it's looking for allocations either on a day by day or potentially an hour by hour or even a minute by minute. Day by day is probably going to be appropriate for you, particularly with this type of schedule. Then it wants to know whether or not you want to level in a specific range or the entire project. In this case, based on what you're doing, you might want to do just a certain range so that it only addresses that tasks that fall into that. And then you notice only within available slack, right? Whether or not it can adjust individual assignments on a task or whether it can create splits in remaining work. So basically you have a leveling order down here below that you can make some adjustments to. Okay. Now once you've made those determinations, you can then go ahead and level it. So we'll go to the next step and actually hit Level Now. And when we hit the Level Now, one of the things that you'll notice is in the lower pane that it did actually level for us, right? It pushed this particular task. So the green is what we had before, and the blue is what we then have after we've conducted the leveling. Okay. Now if we had done this and we said, well, let's see how this actually affected our project. If I go up to Project and Project Information, if you recall that earlier date, right, to the date that it is now from a finish date perspective, and we can see how that adjustment was made there. Okay, now if I had done that and I said, well, I want to go ahead and remove that leveling, I still have the option of going up to Tools and Level Resources, and I can still clear the leveling out of there, right? So I can remove the leveling from this particular project by clearing the leveling, the entire project, and clicking OK, and you can just see how it shifts the entire schedule back. Now on the next couple pages in your in your PDF, you'll notice that there's a section on manually resolving overallocations, and there's a list of project management techniques that one can use in order to resolve overallocations if the level resources command doesn't do exactly what you need it to do. So a couple things is increasing the maximum unit available. So basically what it's saying is that if we were using Kim right as an unnamed resource, for example, and we said, well, we're just going to simply increase, we're going to hire somebody else in the capacity of that particular role, we could do that. We could reschedule, we could add overtime, we could adjust the dependencies. Maybe this relationship between these two tasks isn't quite appropriate, so we might be able to change that. If Kim wasn't critical to the completion of this particular task, we might want to remove her from that, right? Replace her with a different resource. We can make some calendar adjustments perhaps, and then also make an adjustment to the work itself if that's appropriate. That's probably going to be one of your last resorts because you've already compiled the amount of work that you think it's going to take to complete that task. Okay. So one of the things that we can do is if we were going to go look at a particular resource, we could increase the resource maximum units, for example, for a particular resource. In this case, we have Kim Rawls assigned to this task, so that won't be necessarily appropriate for us here. Replacing one resource with another resource would be something else that we might want to do in this case. And so let's go ahead and replace Kim Rawls with a particular resource. So even in this case, if I had, while I'm in this lower pane here, if I click on the task number 10 and I say, well, I'm going to go ahead and replace this resource with a different one, if I click on the Assign Resources dialog box, you'll notice that there's Kim Rawls here. And what I'm going to want to do if I was going to replace Kim with the project manager, with Kim selected, and I hit replace, I'm then going to replace her with the PM and click OK. And then click close. So what you'll notice that I didn't do is I didn't simply just remove Kim from that task, but rather I used the Assign Resources command to specifically replace Kim with a new resource, in this case the project manager. So now the project manager has that new assignment, right? And Kim is no longer over allocated for this particular task.